And let's transition with a time of prayer. Let's pray together. Dear God, we give you thanks for this medium once again. And God, how nice it was we could all have a personal hospital visit with Betty. God, we pray for Kathy right now. We know that she's going to be saying goodbye to her mom in a few minutes. But we give you thanks for that successful surgery. Now, God, we invite you to be in the room with us, wherever our room is. Open your word to us, open our conversation. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, a quick review. We're doing the I am statements of God, and I just wanted to review the I am. Does anybody remember about what the I am? What was the significance of Jesus saying I am?
It's what God called himself.
Okay.
It's the only name that I wrote that it's the only name God could be, I am. Because where we're given names from our parents, God is God. I am.
Okay.
No beginning, no end. He was forever. So he is, yeah.
Right.
And the name was so sacred that people wouldn't say it.
Wouldn't say it, wouldn't write it. And then here's Jesus saying, I am.
Yeah.
It was pretty powerful. Okay, so our focus on Ash Wednesday was I am the light of the world. And now that's always the first statement when you start this kind of study. Why do you think that Jesus first claimed himself to be, I am the light of the world? And I give you a hint, it goes way back to the very beginning.
And then there was light.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he said, let there be light. Light was the first creation. And also we read in the beginning of John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became God. The Word was God, and the Word became flesh, and the Word became the light of the world. So the light of the world. Then last week we talked about I am the bread of life. So who can come up with anything special that we talked about with the bread of life?
Well, every culture had bread. I wrote that down. I mean, every culture has some kind of bread that's significant to them. So that would he would relate to everyone if he called himself the bread.
Except when we said that, Molly said, yeah, but there's people that ate rice instead. I want you to know that she told us that we were wrong with the bread. Everybody had bread. Some just had rice.
Okay, well, I'll go back and erase that then.
Every culture has some kind of starch, which is the significance of bread. And bread was the staff of life in that culture. So if Jesus had been born in a Japanese culture, he might have said, I am the rice of the world.
Okay.
The staff, the staple of life that you cannot exist without. Okay. And we talked quite a bit about communion and the meaning of communion and the bread in communion, and how it was God's presence is more in communion than any other time except baptism, because those are the two sacraments. So today, yeah, go ahead, Carol.
I'm sorry, Molly. What has really stuck with me this week is when you said that if you ate a peanut butter sandwich, there'd still be a little bit of peanut butter sandwich in the tip of your finger. Do you remember saying that if you ingested it and it went through your whole system, that I don't know why that struck me funny, but I thought about it.
And we take Christ into our whole system,
Right.
He becomes part of us.
Right.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. Today we're talking about I am the door of the sheep. So I'm just, before we get into it a lot, I'm going to give you, what do you know about sheep? Some of you might know more than I do. Do you know anything about sheep?
They start out as lambs.
Okay.
They're followers. They get sheared for their wool.
Okay.
They follow a leader. They follow somebody. They don't.
Okay. You know anything else? Okay, I don't know, because I know I've talked with, in Forestville, there's a woman named Martha Woolley who raises sheep.
Your name really Wooly?
Really is, Martha Woolley. If you've seen a Woolley, Riles and Woolley Funeral Home, that's the Woolley family. So she does, she raises sheep, and she tells, asked me, and I've done some research. Now, first of all, sheep are herd animals. Dan kind of mentioned it. They will not do anything individual. If the lead sheep goes over a cliff, they'll all follow. Yeah, lemmings get the credit for that, but sheep are like that. They will follow. And I also found out that sheep have this huge peripheral vision. You cannot sneak up behind a sheep.
Huh.
Because they can see like almost directly. I mean, it goes way behind where we can see. Now, I can't see my hands except that I'm on video, but sheep could see that far behind. So I tried this out one time. I saw a herd of sheep and I couldn't believe it. And every time I would sneak so quietly, before I get anywhere close, the whole herd would start going in one direction because they could all see me. I didn't know they had this huge peripheral vision. But sheep are also, they have almost no defenses against any predators except for this peripheral vision. But then what does it do? They can't run particularly fast, and they're these big fluffy things, and they're one track when they eat. They just eat, and you have to watch that they don't overeat the grass so it won't regrow. So sheep are not really smart animals. And they're very high strung. They're nervous. They will actually die of a heart attack if they get scared. They really are. And they can't go into moving water. If they go in because of their fluffy bill, they'll drown. So that's why, the psalmist says to lead me by the still waters. So these are all about sheep. And I did a little comparison of a few weeks ago, quite a few weeks ago, on the difference between sheep and goats. And goats, somebody's coming back in. Okay, goats are very individual. Hey, we've got Rosie on.
Rosie, yay!
Hi. I finally decided to try my iPad.
Okay, now Rosie, turn off the other, whatever it was, because you're going to be echoing now. So just turn that one off and you'll be with us. And there she is. Okay,
Hey,
good. Excellent.
Yay.
Okay, so sheep are very much all together, and goats are very individual. They won't follow as well. They don't herd as well. They don't follow the shepherd. A lot different animal. Now, here's an interesting thing about sheep. Do you know how long ago sheep were domesticated? Have any idea?
Well, we know that David was a shepherd.
Okay. Do you know when David lived?
No.
before Jesus.
Before Jesus. Okay. All right. Well, this was my research. I found out that sheep were actually domesticated 5,000 BC. Let me see. Yeah, 5,000 BCE. They have record of sheep being domesticated. And to give you a little idea of the time frame, Abraham of the Bible lived about 2000 BCE.
Wow.
So sheep were domesticated a long time ago. So anything that was natural about predators and things was just bred out of them way long time ago. So sheep are truly have been, and mostly as long as human beings have existed, have been dependent on human beings for care. I mean, there are still some mountain sheep and things that are still wild, but the domesticated sheep has been with us a long time. So we got all this history. Now I'm going to go into a little bit of what is this? It says, I am the door of the sheep.
You preached a sermon and you showed a picture. And so I remember that. So you probably preached on the being the door. So I should probably remember it, right? I remember the picture.
What was the picture of?
It was stone. It was stone enclosure thing.
And what was the door?
I don't want to ruin it for everybody else, and I don't remember.
Ooh, smart answer.
Yeah,
Anybody have any idea? Any idea?
That if you go out the door, they'll follow.
Well, that's part of it, but he doesn't say that. He doesn't say he's the doorway. He says, I am the door.
Shepherd's the door.
So when the first, there's two things we're going to talk about a little more tonight. And they had two kinds of sheepfolds. First, there was one that would be a huge built sheep pen that all of the shepherds in the area would bring their sheep to at night, and they would go in, and then there would be a gatekeeper who would make sure that only the shepherds, the right shepherds, got in, but then the shepherds could go home and go to bed. And they'd have the gatekeeper there keeping, and it would be a very professionally kind of, not like that one. That's not the one. I'm going to ask you to pull that one up again in a second, Nancy, because this would be a good solid gate on it. But when the shepherds would go out in the fields and they would take the sheep out, they wouldn't want to bring them all the way back home. So they would build these not nearly as nice sheep pens, and there would be no door. So the shepherd would actually sleep in the doorway. So any predator that's coming in would have to step over the shepherd. And if the sheep are going to escape, they would have to step on or over the shepherd. So this is the piece of where Jesus is saying, I am the door. I am the one who lets people in, lets people out. So there's the images. Now Nancy can show that picture because that shows exactly what. Okay, so you see that the shepherd is laying right in the doorway.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My
So I am
son said
the
that.
door. All right, so now we've got all that picture in mind. Now I'm going to lead us down a different trail. I'm going to ask you to turn to John chapter 9. Lost John. Okay. Lost Rosie. Okay, and I'm going to ask, we're going to read most of this chapter, and it's going to seem like absolutely nothing we're talking about, but I'll pull it all together. We'll see where it goes. So if someone would like to start reading, it's a long chapter, and we're going to end at verse 38. So someone can start and then pass it on to somebody else. John
start.
chapter 9.
As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. Where is he now? They asked. I don't know, he replied.
Okay, someone
Anyone
else?
else? Should I keep going?
Someone else can say. Someone else read?
I can read.
Okay, thanks, Carol.
They brought to the Pharisee the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. Finally, they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. And the man replied, he is a prophet. The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. Is this your son? They asked. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it now he can see? We know he is our son, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind. Just a minute. Yeah, my phone's messing up. Oh, I've lost it. Somebody else needs to take over. Sorry.
I can do it.
Okay.
But by what means he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age, ask him. He will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So they again called the man who was blind and said to him, give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. Then they said to him again, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him and said, you are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from. The man answered and said to them, why, this is a marvelous thing that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, you were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us? And they cast him out.
Okay, I'm gonna
Jesus-
stop there. That's as far as I want. I didn't really want to go that far. That's right where it is. Okay, so this story, here's this man, born blind, and he's now a man of age, and Jesus is able to heal him, and he's able to see. And what did they do when he admitted that Jesus was a prophet? What did they do to him? What did the leaders of the temple do?
They didn't believe him.
They didn't believe him. And what else did they do?
They kicked him out.
They kicked him out of the temple. Okay. All right. So this story then leads us right into chapter 10. So now we're going to jump down and start in chapter 10. We're going to put these stories together and see why it's coming. So let's start with, I want to read chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. Someone else would like to read that.
I can read it. I tell you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief or a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they didn't understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever come before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full.
Okay. So how do these two stories connect? Anybody got an idea? The miracle of the blind man being healed and then Jesus being the gate, the door.
Is it have to do with sight? Like you can see the blind man was given sight, and therefore those who believe on Jesus, like kind of literally have sight to see who he is and know that he is the great I am.
Could be. Could be. Any other thoughts? Okay, let me say now, what happened again to the man once he admitted that Jesus was this prophet?
He was kicked out of the
It's kicked
temple
out.
for the, yeah.
So who's the gatekeeper to the temple?
Who's the
Keeper
gatekeeper?
to the temple.
Was it the Pharisees? And
Well, who was the one who kicked him out?
Pharisee, right?
The Pharisees, did it say it was the leaders of the temple?
leaders of the temple, yeah.
It could be the Sadducees, it could be the priests, the people that were the ones that could say who could come in and who wasn't. And why did they kick him out in reality?
Was he healed on the Sabbath?
Jesus healed, but they didn't kick Jesus out. They kicked the man out, the blind man out. So what was the real, what do you think? Well, what was their reason for kicking him out? And what was the real reason why they kicked him out?
Well, I would think the real reason was that they were afraid of Jesus, or that he was real.
Yeah, and this man, it was the most obvious miracle. He was this beggar that everybody knew, and his parents said, yes, this is our son who was born blind. It was a bona fide miracle in every sense. So they're afraid.
Did they kick him out because he did it on the Sabbath?
Well, but they didn't kick out Jesus. They kicked out the man who received it. So what he wasn't.
He was kicked out because he was a follower of, he was a disciple of Jesus. And they said that they were disciples of Moses. So we know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. So
I would say as the sheep that he was now listening to Jesus's voice and not the leaders of the temple.
Right. Well, look at the last verse, in verse 34 in chapter 9. So it was,
replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out.
okay. So they're kicking out this man because they say he's a sinner. They kicked out the man born blind because they're blaming the blindness on himself. He was born blind because he was a sinner. Because see, in that day, if you had a sickness or something happened, it was because you sinned.
Yeah.
Or your parents sinned.
or your parents sinned, because if he was born blind, that would mean that the sin could have happened while he was still in utero. Mother could have done something bad. Like
Blame it on the mother.
blame it on the mother. There we go. Okay, so then they said, okay, so what we think is true, and you are wrong, so you go out. So we are the gatekeepers. We say who comes in and who goes out. Then Jesus goes, I am
The
the
gate.
door.
Ah,
I am the door, not you. I am the door. I am the one who says who comes in and who goes out, not you. Now, think about this shepherd. Now, this shepherd is keeping the sheep in and is keeping the bad things out. So I want you to put yourself in the place of the sheep. If you're not real smart and you've got this shepherd that cares about you, how do you feel when you're in the sheepfold with the shepherd at the gate?
Hey,
Safe.
Safe.
sure, yeah.
Protected.
Yeah. I had this wonderful little event with my granddaughter this week. She always comes into everything. And she's got this new stool that's a couple of steps, and they put like a gate all the way around it. So you got to climb up under it, and then you climb backwards and go out. Well, she decided to come out at frontwards. So she slides down, and I'm watching her, and I could see that she kind of scraped. And I thought, okay, I'm going to watch. You know, she got down, she walked across the room, and all of a sudden she realized that it hurt. I mean, it was like 20 steps, and then you know, the face. And she runs across the room into Mimi's arms.
This is
You know,
Mimi.
this is, you know, I have a name. I finally have a name. I'm Mimi. And I thought, you know that face. And she goes, oh, I hurt. I need to go where I'm loved and I'm okay. And, you know, I picked her up, and it wasn't a bad hurt, obviously, because she walked away from it and then realized. But she just wanted, climbed up in my lap. We had a hug for a minute. Everything's fine. Can you imagine if we're the sheep in the sheepfold and Jesus is that shepherd that we can run to? I am the door. I am the one that will protect you. I will let in who comes in, and I will let you out only when it's safe. I am the door of the sheep. Door of the sheep. Yeah, I am the door. And so Jesus tells this parable right after this incident of the man that was kicked out of the temple. He says, mm-mm. And now think about the people that were listening. What are they thinking at this point? If you're listening to this, are you beginning to get it? Who's telling the truth? If you're listening to everybody, who's telling the truth in all this story?
well,
Blind.
Jesus says, I tell you the truth.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, the blind man, he was blind and he's now seeing.
Right? The blind man was telling the truth. And who knew that he was telling the truth?
They all did.
Everybody.
Everybody
that
did.
believes.
Everybody knew this guy. They saw him begging, and if he'd been blind from birth, if you've seen someone who's blind and look at their eyes, you know they're blind.
Mhm.
Especially, you know, and no question. So who is the one that's not telling the truth?
Well, the leaders of the temple.
Yeah.
They're protecting themselves. Isn't it very clear? No, we're followers of Moses. Yeah, so we can't follow this man Jesus who can do bona fide miracles. We can't ever have that kind of thing. So get out of here. We don't want people leading us astray, leading you out of the way of the right way. I am the door of the sheep. Has anybody got any thoughts on that? How Jesus is the door?
You know, I've never seen that picture that Nancy brought up. And I don't know that I knew that the shepherds would put up a, temporary sheepfold and then sleep in the doorway. But that just gives me a different sense of peace.
Yeah,
I mean,
agreed.
it really does. I just have never thought about that.
In our culture, we don't automatically understand sheep and shepherds and so when we say the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, we say it, but until we hear what you're teaching and hear the story about the door and hear it was always a nice thing to hear, but now as an adult, when I've heard more and more about sheep, it makes it much more meaningful to me than just this guy that took care of animals,
And that
It's-
sheep wouldn't go into running water. I didn't know that. And that's the significance of he leads me
and
beside.
I never thought of the still waters ever. It's just,
either.
I mean, that's another thing I didn't ever put. I never thought about it being still waters as significant like it is. I mean,
And they go farther, leads me in the green pastures, because the sheep are known for chewing down too low, so it's not green anymore. So the shepherd has to shoo them out when they've eaten enough, so that the grass will replenish itself and takes them to another green pasture.
It's interesting too that the sheep choose to follow the shepherd. So it's sort of like we choose to follow Jesus. We if we're like sheep, we would want to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
When my sister was first married, she lived on a sheep farm. And I'd go out to help her put the hay in the troughs and that before the sheep came in. And I could stand in the doorway and say something and they just kept on wandering. But boy, let them hear her voice and they'd be running.
Interesting.
They know who protects them. They know who's there. See, part of that with the big sheepfold where all the shepherds would bring their sheep in, that would be, it didn't matter who went in, but in the morning when the shepherds would come, only the sheep that knew that particular shepherd would go. So it was very easy to put them back in their herds because each shepherd knew their own sheep and the sheep knew their own shepherd.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So deep tonight.
Indeed. These are really, really big things, these I am statements. There's just an awful lot. And you have to know the culture. And most everyone knew about sheep. That would have been a much bigger part of their culture than it is ours.
Right.
The sheep. Okay, let's see what else we can do with this one. All right, so why do you think Jesus he's talking about, I am the gate, and whoever enters through me will be saved, and they will come and go in and out and find pasture. The thief enters only to steal, kill, and destroy. Why did Jesus put that part about the thief in?
Well, I think that
No,
would be like the sin. If you were tempted to do something you weren't supposed to be doing.
Or would it maybe be the leaders of the temple again, trying to, adding extra rules and things and drawing people away from Jesus and more to the law? I don't know.
But what was their motive?
Well, they were going to lose their jobs if Jesus was right. I mean, they're going to lose their credibility, and right?
Right, because he wasn't one of them.
Right.
He didn't have the pedigree. He didn't have now you think about his cousin John the Baptist. Let's put a comparison there. Now, John the Baptist, could he have preached effectively in the temple with the leaders of the temple? Would they have let him?
I doubt it. He was pretty radical.
But what was he radical in doing?
Well, I'm thinking just physical things, the way he dressed and where he lived and what he ate and, you know.
Yeah, where did he live and what did he eat?
The wilderness, he was out in the,
Didn't he eat locusts or something? I don't know.
Ate locusts, wild locusts and wild honey. Yeah, and it would have been the bugs. It would have been crunchy.
Thank you, Molly.
Oh, we eat lobster. Come on, it's no different
He's
than
just getting
lobster,
us ready.
shrimp. Same kind of things here, because we're not used to it. Okay, so
Was John as trained or educated in the religion as much as Jesus
his
was?
father would have been.
Because I mean, Jesus spent time at the temple and learned, and did John do that, or John was just sort of more of a, I don't know.
His father.
answer the question yourself. Who was John? Who was John?
Jesus' cousin.
He was Jesus' cousin. We don't know. It wasn't like a first cousin. It was a cousin, a relative. Who were John's parents?
Priest. It was
Priest. Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Well,
Elizabeth and Zachariah, what was Zachariah's profession?
It's a priest.
He was a priest. And a pretty high one, because he got to go in the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
So John was raised in the temple. He was raised to follow in his father's footsteps. He was in the right tribe. He was in the right everything. So they never could have kicked John out of the temple because he was one of them. But John instead went out to the wilderness. I hate it that my hand keeps going out of the screen. I can't show my gestures. John went out in the wilderness and took people away from the temple. So that was a criticism of John, that he wasn't bringing them to the temple. He went away. He had the pedigree. He could have preached in the temple at any time and would have been accepted.
Ah.
Whereas Jesus was the blue collar carpenter who lived in the wrong part of the country. He probably worked in the Roman city as a young adult, working as a tradesman, and so they were kicking Jesus out and they wanted John to stay in. But then Jesus says, I am the one that chooses. So let me throw in a piece here. Is there anybody but Christians who will get into heaven?
Whoa.
Jesus says, I am the door.
Denominations are formed on this very thing.
Denominations, yeah. What do you think?
I think if somebody accepts walking through the door, no matter what religion they profess, if they choose to walk through that door, they have made the acknowledgement of who Jesus is and who God is and the Trinity, or they wouldn't walk through the door. I think you have, I think that's a pretty big understanding that you need to have.
But Abraham had two sons. I mean, he had, well, I don't know how many sons he had, but he had Ishmael, who has a connection with a lot of people in this world, with a different direction with.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, we're pretty, we don't know. I don't know.
And I grew up in a very, I grew up in the Methodist church, and I will say Methodist. It became United Methodist when I was a young child. But I grew up with a very conservative, almost Baptist branch where my little church was. And I grew up with the booklet called The Four Spiritual Laws. And how many of you have heard of that?
Heard of it.
Heard of it? I've heard of it.
Yep.
Okay. And it was the exact method you had to do to become a Christian. And if you didn't become a Christian in this particular way, you were destined to go not to heaven. And I'm thinking as I read this, and I think about the Pharisees saying, this is the way, and Jesus going, I am. It's not the way you particularly have it in mind. I am the one who opens the door and closes the door. I am the one. It's my decision, not yours.
I would think that Jesus would want to be more inclusive than exclusive as far as wanting people to go through the gate. So you said, are there religions or something, can they get into heaven or not? I would think that Jesus would want those people to be included if they could be. I don't know how.
Well, he came to save everybody.
Yeah,
Right, the Great Commission.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
He came to save everybody. And I think about him when he was on the cross and he turned to the thief who believed in him. Who knows what his faith or lack of faith had been in his life. At that moment, he acknowledged Jesus, and Jesus said, "You'll be with me in heaven." So
They haven't written that book yet, the 4 things. So
I always heard the only ones that got into heaven were the Baptists anyway. So
that's what I've been told.
yeah, I don't know if all religions, but most religions believe in God, a God of some sort. So if Jesus is God and you believe in a God, then I guess you also believe in a Jesus type something. I don't know.
You know what? I don't think it's for us to decide, because then we start having judgments. We're just to love everybody and let God sort it out at the end, is how I feel.
Good one, Carol.
That's how I feel about it.
in my house, we will serve the Lord.
Yeah,
We'll take care of
right.
we'll take care of our
I mean, if anytime we start, it seems like we should say, you have to believe in Jesus. And yet, how do we know what's in someone's heart at that moment that they pass from here to there? That's up to God, and it's not up to us to say you're not going to heaven. I just think we need to share what we know and live our lives the way we should and be examples and let God sort it out. I just feel like it's not for us to sort out. I don't know. All right, Molly, tell us the right answer.
Right, because I feel like we've just skirted your question though.
No,
we lost Rosie, by the way. Did she go? Is Rosie okay?
Yeah, is her ceiling.
Molly has written a poem
Okay.
about all of this that I hope you could.
I have to
Share.
pull it up. I
Yeah.
have to pull up a poem. I in my seminary days, I wrote one about love them all, let God sort them out.
I love it.
I gotta
Say that again. Love them all.
love them all, let God sort them out.
Oh, let God sort
That's
them out.
what Carol was saying. Yeah. No, I think because I don't have the answers, and that's the whole point to this. Is Jesus saying, "I am, not you."
Right.
And people have taken this verse and then the other verse, the famous one, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father but by me." And they've taken these verses and they've used it in a way to say that not Jesus, but my way, how I think is the way you're going to get in, because this is the way I read this verse. And so if you don't, you're wrong. So they've taken that verse that Jesus put specifically to preach against that and used it for that. Did I kind of talked in circles there? Did you understand what I was saying? Okay. So Jesus is using this verse, "I am the door," which is saying you are not. And people have taken that verse and they've said, okay, so Jesus said, I am the door. So now you have to get into the heaven the way that I interpret this verse. So then I make myself the doorkeeper instead of Jesus, in the using the very verse that Jesus said to go act against that, to say, you are not the door. I am the only one that decides.
And I know I shared this early on when we were studying Luke, but our pastor of this small church up in Indiana, that where I play on Sunday mornings, every week, somehow he works it into a sermon, is that we're not called to judge, we're called to love. We can be fruit inspectors, which I think is, we can identify the fruit of the Spirit in people's lives, but we are not called to judge whether they're going to heaven or not. We're just called to love. And that just stays with me.
Absolutely.
And Jesus said, I am the one who decides. I am the one who lets people in or doesn't. I am the one who sees in the hearts. I know what's safe. I know who isn't. It is all me. And just trust me, and we're going to be okay. So Jesus, next week, we're going to talk about I am the good shepherd, which seems like the same, but there's a lot of, I haven't studied enough yet to tell you what it's going to be. But
So I have a question, Molly.
Yeah.
So we did I am the bread of life last week. But did we do I am the light of the world? Did I miss that?
that was the theme of my Ash Wednesday meditation. So
I missed it. Okay, got it. Thank you. I'll go back and get that.
You can go look. It wasn't. I didn't really hit real hard on it. I wish I could have done more, but I had to
Yeah,
look someplace.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're doing a lot more in depth with the Bible study than you did on the Wednesday service thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I had to make choices.
Right. Okay, thanks.
All right. So I think it's time to wind us down. So question.
Make a comment. To make a comment about the sheep, I helped the one summer shear the sheep. My hands were the softest I've ever been in my life or ever will be.
Whoa, all that lanolin.
Yeah.
I think about sheep. My grandmother lived with us. My grandfather had dementia, and he got to a place where grandma and grandpa couldn't live out in the farm. So they moved in with us when I would have been like 3 or 4. And he died when I was pretty young, but my grandmother lived with us until I was a senior in high school. And I can remember at Easter, every so often there would be a farm and that had sheep. And my grandmother was almost always just stayed at home. She went to church and she was at our house and she took care of me. And my siblings were older, so I was still needing to be taken care of more than they did. But I can remember we would get in the car, at least some of us would get in the car with grandma in the spring around Easter time, and when the baby lambs were out. And whenever I think about my grandmother in a lot of ways with I had a connection with her with at any rate, she taught me some Bible verses to memorize, and I just had a connection spiritually with her, and that was one of my favorite things to do, is to go see the sheep, and the baby lambs, and we would just park nearby the farm, and we would just sit there and watch them flopping around and jumping, and so I've always had a love for sheep because of my grandmother, and I'm just really loving that I'm getting more understanding of this whole thing. But it I don't know, just in my heart with my grandma.
We used to come down Pine Hill in the spring, and we didn't see sheep. We saw the calves. We see the Browns or the Andrews or whatever. So our kids missed out on the sheep. They had to put up with cows.
When the brats were there, they were usually in the road.
Hmm.
There was a family that lived on the corner that their last name were Brats. I'm not calling them Brat. They're last. Oh, so anyway.
Okay, well, and any other questions or comments on the I am the door of the sheep?
A lot to think about.
Yeah, I got a lot out of this.
Yeah.
It
me
was
too.
very, we need to process that, but it was very good.
Okay, well, this will be recorded, and I did upload last week as I promised, and this will be uploaded if you want to go back through it or let anybody else know. It'll be on YouTube. I'm working on getting a YouTube site actually for the church, so it's not
That'd be nice.
no more. So I'm working on that, but there's an time limit of my time, and we'll see where it goes. But anyway, I'm going to turn us off now, and then we can take some prayer concerns and thoughts. So off it goes.